Hello and welcome. My name is Olivia Hupp, and on behalf of Youth Time International Movement, thank you for joining us. Today's interview is with Nikola Stanojevic, an entrepreneur, activist, and innovator whose current work with Biosporin has won him the 2020 Innovation of the Year award. During this interview, we will discuss what exactly is Biosporin, the problem or problems it solves, and the impact it could have on the future. Do not forget, this is an interactive session, and we highly encourage you to ask your questions and get involved. Without further ado, let's get started. All right. Thank you for joining us, Nikola. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Great.
All good.
All right. So let's get started here. So first, I wanted to ask you, what was your motivation into getting into sustainability? So many people have ideas or have the wants to get involved, but very few actually act on that. So what motivated you to get involved in and innovating in sustainability?
Well, it's somehow my interest for sustainability. Sustainability has always been there. It's not something that was, born out of a sudden. I'm a biologist, and by trade, I'm interested in nature and in life as such. And I grew up in the countryside. I grew up somewhere where there is very little pollution and where there is a lot of greenery around. So I generally always have had an affinity for ecology, so to say. So when we started working in this sphere, in this area, the idea actually naturally came as a consequence of what we were doing primarily, and the sustainability was just inherent to the idea. We didn't actually start off wanting to create something specifically down the niche of being circular technology, but we actually discovered along the way that it was something that can be completely circular and completely sustainable. So we just drove the development in that direction.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like it came up very organically then, just through your career and how this has all kind of found or laid itself out.
Yeah, pretty much. So if we're talking specifically about Biosporin, Biosporin was actually born as a consequence of a different project that we were involved in. So we primarily started growing Ganoderma lucidum, the mushroom that helps us to produce Biosporin. We started to grow it for pharmaceutical reasons. So it's a mushroom that is used as a health supplement and pharmaceutical precursor. So it's used in the health industry as adjunct treatment for certain types of cancer and autoimmune disorders. So we first started producing the mushroom for that purpose, and we have products on the market. It's called Immunin, and it's a pharmaceutical supplement. And during the production, we already kind of knew that since mushrooms are a very, very versatile organism, and it can produce a lot of different forms and a lot of different physical characteristics just by controlling the substrates that is used to grow it and by controlling the conditions under which it's grown. So we knew that it can produce some kind of different materials, but we never really looked at it deeply until at around the same time that we started working with the pharmaceutical aspect of this mushroom. At the same time, the pollution crisis and the plastic pollution became much more apparent than it was previously. And that was around the time that the European Union started talking about introducing laws to regulate single-use plastic packaging. And when we found samples of microplastics were found in human tissue, and now they've been found in fetal tissue as well. So when we actually started noticing that microplastics is everywhere, that there's plastics in the ocean, like a fifth of the weight of fish right now at this moment, I think. So at the same time, we kind of saw that there is a need on the market for something that can be used as a sustainable, biodegradable substitute for certain kinds of plastic. And we knew that this mushroom can create all kinds of different physical qualities. So we started working on producing a prototype, and we basically managed to experimentally get the mushroom to create a type of material that has all the technical characteristics of styrofoam. So that's how we actually came to that point. And at the same time, we were involved with the Academy of Circular Economy, with the how do you call it? Never mind. Academy of Circular Economy, with the Chamber of Commerce. Sorry. At which we were in a position to do a few analysis of material flows and of waste streams that basically showed us what kinds of products are the biggest source of microplastics. So we had the idea, if we can create a material that can serve as a substitute for styrofoam, which is one of the main sources of microplastics because it's not recycled and it's either burned or it goes into landfills. About 30% of the volume of a landfill is usually different types of styrofoam. And from there, it crumbles, it goes into the water and gets to us, basically. So we saw that possibility. And at the same time, we knew that legal action is going to follow with the regulative against single-use plastic packaging already being talked about. So we aimed to create a material that can serve to make products for single-use packaging that can reduce pollution in that way. So we worked around 2 years to develop that technology specifically. We were supported by the Fund for Innovations during that time to bring our product from prototype to industrial scale production, which we finished about December last year. And about that time, we won the award that you mentioned for the best technological innovation. So it was a lot of it organic, as you say. It was a very spontaneous journey in a sense. We didn't set out to create something specifically, but we were researching the properties of a material that already exists. It's a biotic material that, in a sense, exists in nature. Mushrooms have been the first thing on land, so they have been around for a very long time. However, when put into a specific context, they can give us certain results. So the material is basically a biotic material, which means it's in the same group like wood, bamboo, gum, things like that are produced naturally. However, it doesn't exist in nature as such. You cannot find the material anywhere in nature because the conditions for the mushroom to create it don't exist anywhere in nature. So as far as the material itself goes, it's produced 100% using agricultural waste. So that was another side problem that we also identified, especially here in Serbia. Every fall, there is a big problem with disposing of agricultural waste from farms. And there's a lot of third world countries that have that same problem, that simply don't have a regulated way of dealing with agricultural waste, and it's simply burnt on the fields, which again causes additional pollution. So we thought of combining those two problems and making one solution for them, which is to use agricultural waste combined with the mushroom that we are specifically selecting and cloning in our lab for that purpose, and create this material that can help reduce plastic pollution.
So it's kind of a two birds, one stone scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you mentioned that it's biodegradable, but you're also using it for a lot of different materials. So how long does it take for the Biosporin to break down fully, or to a point where it's no longer usable for its intended purposes?
That depends a lot on the conditions that it's in. So a study was performed at the Faculty of Agriculture here in Belgrade with all the different types of conditions and to basically assess how quickly and in what conditions it degrades and what it degrades into. So Biosporin, if it's held in a room, in room conditions, so normal, dry, room temperature conditions. Our oldest sample is about 4.5 years old. So that's the oldest sample of Biosporin in existence, and it's still the same. So it's virtually completely unchanged. What triggers the biodegradation is a combination of moisture and bacteria. And those bacteria are found exclusively in soil. So when Biosporin is in contact with the soil and has enough moisture, it will start to biodegrade. It loses its physical properties within a week or two, so it becomes a lot softer and more permeable. But total biodegradation can last from 3 to 6 months until it's completely dissolved and disappeared. If it's in the soil in dry conditions, I think the longest we had one was about 10 months before it starts to lose its mechanical properties. And after it biodegrades, it disappears completely. So there is no solid detritus, doesn't leave anything behind that's tangible, but it melts into organic salts, which actually fertilize the soil. So it has been quantified by the Faculty of Agriculture that it can be used as a partial organic fertilizer.
Wow. So it not only does it have really good intentions and purposes, I mean, 3 to 6 months is a lot better than 1,000 years for styrofoam or plastic, but then it kind of gives back into the ecosystem that it's already in now. So it might reduce trash waste that are in landfills on top of everything else.
Yep, exactly. I mean, we kind of envisioned it as a circular system. We use agricultural waste to create Biosporin. Biosporin has its use cycle. We again have a few cascades there where damaged pieces of Biosporin can be returned into the production stream once again to reutilize the material. We don't have to throw it out immediately. And after it gets through its time of usage, it goes back to the farm as fertilizer. So it's basically grabbing a stream that would naturally be either burnt, or if, for instance, plant material is degraded naturally in forests, it's also degraded by mushrooms. Mushrooms are basically the nature's system for recycling. So once the mushroom degrades it, bacteria eat the mushroom and return it to the soil. So we are basically just grabbing it out of the natural cycle for a moment to use it as a product and then returning into the soil.
Perfect. So it's completely sustainable, if not even pulling negative things out of the atmosphere, like extra carbon.
Actually, it does. So the production is carbon negative. 1 ton of Biosporin absorbs 0.2 tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. However, we also did a comparative analysis of 1 ton of styrofoam versus 1 ton of Biosporin that's produced, commercialized, and ends its life cycle. So complete life cycles of the product. And the results are that basically 1 ton of Biosporin, if we replace 1 ton of styrofoam on the market with it, we reduce CO2 emissions by 8.9 tons per ton, methane emissions by 2.8 tons. We reduce solid plastics and microplastic waste by 300 kilograms, and ashes, so emission of ashes and dust by about 180 kilograms.
Wow. So it's having a huge impact.
Well, it will when it's commercialized enough. So when it gets into normal everyday use, the idea is for it to have a markable impact.
Absolutely. So is there a timeline for when it will be in the market and usable on potentially a worldwide scale?
Well, for the worldwide scale, there is no specific date. We're not yet thinking that far ahead. We have been engaged in commercial pilots since December. We're still working on them. Progress is a bit slower than anticipated, but in the current climate and in the current conditions, that's to be expected. And we are planning to have some products on the market as early as summer. So by the summer, we will have some products that are specifically made from Biosporin that aren't packaging. So concrete, this is about sports and yoga equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And the packaging, we are already working on a few commercial pilots through which we hope to get into production. By now, what we are engaged with is the maximum of our capacity, if I'm being honest. So production of Biosporin is still not large scale. It's not even, it's between small scale and mid scale right now, because a part of the production cycle is done manually. The equipment required to mass produce Biosporin doesn't exist. We've had to design it from scratch. So we've designed the first set of machines that we have also produced and patented for the production of Biosporin as a raw material, partially automated.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step is to patent the equipment for the second part of production, and to, you know, have an entire industrial mass scale pipeline for producing Biosporin.
Absolutely. So it sounds like it's getting bigger slowly, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, these things simply take time, especially with an innovative material that you really don't know a lot about. I mean, we ourselves are finding out new things about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned styrofoam and equipment, exercise equipment, excuse me, as part of the uses for Biosporin. How big of a scale, or what kind of things can you use Biosporin for? Is it replacing, I mean, really anything we use in day-to-day life, or how common will it be in any object we see?
Well, that really depends on what the technical characteristics of the thing you want to produce are. So Biosporin has its ranges of things it can produce, and has its limitations. Of course, it's not a perfect material. For instance, the biodegradability, which is its main purpose, is also a limiting factor in many uses. Most of the interest that we get, and most of the companies which come to us to ask about Biosporin, actually come from the construction industry. So from construction companies that are interested in using it as an isolation for walls.
Wow.
However, I mean, that would be great, but on the other hand, Biosporin is biodegradable. So if you have a break or leak in the wall and water comes in, it's going to start to biodegrade, which isn't going to happen if you're using styrofoam.
Mm-hmm.
So we are working on a potential solution to that. We're working with a team of chemists from the technological metallurgy faculty, who are developing a kind of resins that can be impregnated into the material or coated on the material, to allow it to be hydrophobic completely, and to give it certain characteristics, for instance, not being biodegradable until it's not physically broken. So until the outer shell is intact, it shouldn't start biodegrading. And then when you want it to biodegrade, you can break the outer shell and it will start to biodegrade when it's normally thrown away in nature. So that's some of the potential directions of research that we can take to expand the field in which it can be applied.
Absolutely. So it sounds like a really great process and product when it's finished and we can use it. But one thing that comes to mind is the monetary cost. Is it comparable to styrofoam in cost, or replacing styrofoam? Are they one-to-one in that? Is it?
Well, our goal is to get at least one-on-one. So right now we have gotten the production to a level of being around 30% more expensive than the cheapest styrofoam. Now there are more expensive forms of styrofoam as well, depending on the application. So that is definitely still a minus, because styrofoam production is very large scale and the machinery is very thought through and optimized. We don't yet have the capability for this. However, even without the equipment, we got the cost to just 30% above styrofoam, which means that with further automation and with further optimization, we plan to get the price to at least equal that of styrofoam, because we are very well aware that ecological progress usually doesn't come because people are conscious or aware. It comes because solution is cheaper or you are legally forced to use it. So we are aiming, to have those two traits on our side.
It would be ideal if we all switched to green things, even if it was more expensive because it was better for the environment. But unfortunately,
it's interesting because a survey done by the, I think, International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, one of those, a year and a half ago, just before Corona struck, was that people were actually prepared to pay at least 15% more. So 60% of respondents were prepared to pay up to 15% more for a product that was sustainable or sustainably packaged. So there is definitely some hope. Of course, it all depends on the country and on the consumer level of a country. So in Western Europe, it's easier to spend 15 cents on something that is for the planet. But in poorer countries who are at the same time the biggest pollutants, it's a bit more difficult to get people to spend on something that they don't see in front of them.
Exactly. So we've talked a lot about Biosporin and what it is now. So how does it get from a fungus mushroom stage to your insulation in a building stage? What does that timeline look like? Is it time consuming to grow the mushrooms that are required to then have a Biosporin product?
Well, the mushroom itself is produced in the lab and it's in a liquid form, basically. So the agricultural waste is processed in a certain way. It's homogenized, sterilized, and gotten to a certain level of moisture. And then it's inoculated with the liquid mushroom, from which the mushroom basically starts growing through the agricultural waste and consuming it. Okay. So when we put the waste into a mold of any kind, the mushroom will grow throughout that mold, consuming the waste and solidifying it, and it will grow into the shape of the mold that we left there. After that point, we kill the mushroom with heat, we dry it. There are certain ways of post-processing it depending on the application, and then it's ready for use. The entire process from beginning to end is about 1 month long. However, by overlapping the processes, we've gotten down to 5 to 6 days from moment of order to moment that we can produce something. And that's achieved by having constant circulating amounts of raw material that you can just press into molds and accelerating the time it takes to grow. So that was basically the main part of our project for the last year, was to optimize that production to be as quick and as cost efficient as possible.
Wow, I'm impressed. I had no idea that mushrooms could grow into whatever shape you wanted to. For some reason in my head, I had an image of just picking mushrooms out of the forest and in a basket to the lab, kind of.
Yeah, but actually we've had that impression several times. But you see, what you pick in the field is actually could be closely considered to a flower, a flower with petals from the mushroom, because the body of the mushroom is actually underground. The body of the mushroom is a very fine network of fibers that's throughout the dirt. You can't see it directly, but it's kind of, imagine it like a mold that spreads through a couple of meters. So that network is made up of, basically those are the cells of the mushroom, but its cell walls are made up of a material called chitin. And that's the same material that makes the shells of insects and crustaceans. So mushrooms are more closely related to insects and us than they are to plants by, phylogenetically. But that material is basically what we are using. So that material, when we force it to grow in a more solid network, it forms basically Biosporin. We are also working on a project right now, a new innovation, basically, where we plan to, because that same material, chitin, when it's extracted and isolated from the mushrooms, has a very wide range of applications, and it is used in cosmetics. It's used to produce artificial skin, for instance. It's used for a lot of biomedical purposes.
Wow.
So we're actually working on another project on the side to establish another production line for purified chitin, which we can take from another source, from another waste source, which is production of gourmet mushrooms, so edible mushrooms. There's a lot of waste when you produce them, and a lot of the substrate goes to waste. So for every kilo of produced mushrooms, there are 3 kilograms of waste that are produced. And that waste, we believe, can be used to extract this material chitin from it, and then use it further for medicine and biomedicine. So that's another branch that we are working on that will allow us another application of circular economy.
Absolutely. You keep the cycle going onward and onward.
Yep. Yep. Well, that's, going back to your first question, it's simply natural to work like that with mushrooms because they are cyclic in nature. Everything that they do is kind of connected with nature, connected with cycle, and connected with recycling. So somehow, if you do whatever you do with them, if you do it in the proper way, it's going to naturally evolve into something circular.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it makes total sense. I had never thought about it like that before. So is it possible to create Biosporin or a similar product with any mushroom out there? Or is there something specific about this mushroom that allows Biosporin to act like the material it is?
So it's possible with just a few mushrooms. What you need is something that creates a very strong and tight network of those filaments that I mentioned. And not all mushrooms do that. So this one that's called Ganoderma, it produces very strong material. And the mushroom itself in nature is very strong. When if you've ever gone to a forest, you could have met it somewhere on a tree. They usually grow on a tree like a shell, like something like that, and they're reddish in color. And if you touch it, it's very, very hard. It's like tree bark. So that specific mushroom has a lot of the capabilities to create harder and more dense materials. There's a few other mushrooms that we've experimented with for producing materials and that we can use to produce materials, but they come with different technical characteristics. So some of them will be more soft, some of them will create a foam-like structure. It varies a lot, but it's very limited on which mushrooms you can use to create this kind of material.
I see. Okay. So it's a very specific, it has a lot of the characteristics you need anyway.
Exactly.
In its natural state, you could say, before we can use it for Biosporin.
Yep.
Okay. That makes more sense. I was wondering how that worked. So you mentioned that it tends to biodegrade when it comes into contact with water or soil, bacteria, that sort of stuff. Would you say we could use it for like food transportation, like to-go boxes even? Or would that moisture from the food instantly affect the packaging itself, making it not as ideal as maybe something that's not reusable like styrofoam?
Yeah, so that was one of the first things that we experimented with, because we know that food boxes are one of the most widely used forms of styrofoam. There was another study performed at the Faculty of Agriculture as well, where they experimented with different types of food, packaging them into basically containers that we made from Biosporin.
Sure.
So what was the result of that? Now, this problem actually has two branches. The first branch would be the technical one, where exactly what you said starts to happen. If there is a lot of moisture in the food that's kept into it, it slowly starts absorbing into the Biosporin, and in time it will start to degrade. But that degradation is not so quick. So it would happen within a week or two, maybe. And if it's in a fridge, even slower. However, the only thing that can be safely kept in it is something that's dry. So like dried vegetables or dried something, anything that's dried can be kept in Biosporin, and it doesn't produce a lot of problems. Okay. There's also certain types of stretch foil that's also made from starch. So from biodegradables and natural sources in a circular way. There's also a startup here in Serbia doing that as well. So a combination of Biosporin and that foil can provide a completely sustainable and natural packaging for certain types of food. Those types of food would have to be dry. When meat was tested, there was a specific reaction between the enzymes present in the meat and in the mushrooms, so they started eating into each other. So basically, the meat started eating through the mushroom. So that it's definitely not usable for that kind of purpose. That's one side of the problem. Now we are also, as I said, experimenting with this company for different types of resins that we can impregnate into the material, which would allow us to extend that usage a bit more even. On the other hand, there's a whole other branch of problems, which is the legal and regulatory problems. Specifically, for instance, in the European Union, for now, use of these kinds of materials, of any kind of biotic material that's not classified, is forbidden in touch with anything edible. Because by law, currently as it is, and in Serbia as well, food that would be packaged into something like this would be contaminated by chitin. It would be contaminated by mushroom material. So our law would see it as spoiled, although it's completely not. So Biosporin is completely biologically inactive in the human body. You can eat it. It's really not. It's not toxic. It doesn't do anything. But the law simply doesn't recognize the whole category of biotic materials based on mushrooms as existing. So in our manuals for food packaging, there is no mention of it anywhere. So you can't really package food commercially in it because it's not an accepted material for that purpose. We have been talking to the government from a few different sources on trying to get some kind of way to upgrade the manuals for stuff like that on a national level that would, calculate in for innovative materials.
So has your company, White Lemur, or Biosporin itself, has there been any moves made on a legal level to try and make this regulated on the EU level or even a country level like Serbia to allow for this, or is it still too early in testing?
We have been talking in Serbia to a few institutions and people from the government. However, the problem is that it would require additional non-standard action from the government, because you have to first form a work group, and the work group has to come up with suggestions. They have to go through assembly, and they have to be approved. And these kinds of things are not very interesting, either for the media or flashy or anything. So they are very low on the priority list. So everyone understands the need and everyone agrees that it's something that should be done, but no one is really taking any concrete steps. I know that in the EU, the processes are already underway to allow for a special classification of materials and then to be certified and everything else. Because we like this, our material can't even be certified for use with food because they don't know what to certify it as.
Well, I can't imagine how frustrating that is. You have a product that could solve a lot of issues, but can't even be introduced yet because it's...
That's standard. The electric cars were invented in the 60s. They weren't in use until 15 years ago. So progress, scientific progress and technological progress are often followed by political and social, which is a few steps behind.
Which is unfortunate because this is a solution we could use now. I mean, everyone knows climate change is a huge problem, and microplastic waste and all of these kinds of intermingled problems are problems now, not problems of the future.
Well, they're going to be bigger in the future.
If it would be easier if we could deal with them now rather than later.
Definitely.
Absolutely. All right. So I wanted to say congratulations on the 2020 Innovation Award. It's huge. Is that for Serbia or is that for EU?
It's for Serbia, so
Okay,
it's by the Ministry of Technology and Science.
great. Okay. So
Thank you.
sorry, what were you going to say?
I said thank you. Thank you for your.
So how can people find out more about white lemur and how can people find out more about Biosporin?
Well, you can follow us on social media and our website. The name of the project and the brand under which the material is called Soma. So soma.eco is our website. Soma Fungi is our Facebook, I think also Instagram. So we are around and we post news and updates regularly when there's something going on.
Great.
So people can follow it there definitely. And in the last while, we've been appearing on different media, so we are here and there.
Hopefully getting bigger soon. I hope. All right. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And this was highly educational. I learned a lot myself, and I'm sure anyone tuning in today did as well. So thank you for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Olivia. And thanks to Youth Time for the invitation and the opportunity. And hope to speak to you again at some point.
Absolutely. So follow on social media, and interview will be up on our YouTube channel and our social media channels here soon, so people can keep up with us there. But thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Nikola, again for teaching us about Biosporin.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.